How's it going, everybody? Handsome Dan here with episode 5 of the Grand Tournament. We've had some pretty hotly contested games so far, and if you missed any of them, go ahead and check out the previous episodes. You can find a link to the full playlist in the description below. Before we get started, let's go to the scoreboard to check on our progress. After a hot start by Caleb, the scores evened out a little bit, as both Jelly and I had put wins on the board. Caleb's still in the lead, so he'll be picking first this game, followed by me and Jelly. Derek gets to see what everybody else picks first before he decides what to play. So let's go ahead and take a look at our chosen decks and our starting hands. Caleb only has 2 decks left to play, so he's ready to try to force Ilharg again until he can get a win. Ilharg's had his fair share of moments thus far, but he's really going to need to maneuver his way through a table that's already on high alert. He's going to try keeping a hand this time with a Mountain, Bloodstained Mire, Prismatic Lens, Dockside Extortionist, Morog Fury of Akum, Savage Beating, and Thundermare. Jelly's going to be back with Talrand this game after a very early exit in Game 4. So far, Talrand hasn't been able to get off the ground either, aside from a few counter spells and the occasional removal spell. He's going to hope to hide in the shadow of Ilharg this time, and try to build up his Drake army in this game, keeping a hand with 2 islands, Polluted Delta, Soul Ring, Peak, Preordain, and Squelch. After giving the deck a game off, I'm heading back to Sarulf to see if my luck is any better this time around. My goal is to join forces with the other control decks against Ilharg and hope to be the first one to build up to an explosive finish. I'll start off with a Soul Ring, Regrowth, Dryad of the Legion Grove, Golgari Rot Farm, Nurturing Peatland, Scapeshift, and Culling Ritual. Last but not least, Derek's going to be playing Toshiro Umezawa again. As before, Derek's trying his hardest to play Gatekeeper against Caleb, and is going to use a full suite of instant speed removal spells to protect himself from the threat of Ilharg. So long as he's one of the last ones standing, he should be able to outvalue and outlast the rest of the table. Derek's going to be keeping a hand with 3 Swamps, the Biblioplex, Deserted Temple, Sedgemoor Witch, and Defile. I win the pregame die roll this time, so I'll be going first. I'll get us started by playing a Wasteland, which will tap to cast a Soul Ring and then pass. Derek will play a Swamp and do his own ramping by casting a Dark Ritual, using the mana to then cast a Sedgemoor Witch. Jelly's going to join the ramp party by playing an Island and also casting a Soul Ring. Unfortunately, Caleb didn't get the memo, and so he's just going to play a Mountain and then pass. On turn 2, I'll play a Nurturing Peatland, tapping it for a green and losing a life. I'll then use my other mana to cast Dryad of the Legion Grove. I'll play a Golgari Rot Farm as my second land for turn, choosing to bounce the Peatland back to my hand. With nothing else, we'll go to Derek. Derek's going to go ahead and just play a Swamp as land for turn, and then pass. Jelly's going to drop down a Polluted Delta, and then use his Island to cast a Preordain. He'll put 2 on the bottom, and then draw, then be done after that. Caleb will play a Bloodstained Mire for land on his turn, and both he and Jelly will crack their fetches for basic lands. Caleb will then cast a Prismatic Lens and pass to me. On my turn, I'll drop down Nurturing Peatland as my first land, followed by a Cabal Coffers. I'll then tap some mana to cast Sarulf, and be done after that. Derek's going to be doing the Murder Tribal Classic of playing a Swamp and passing. Jelly will be playing an Island as his land for turn, and then tapping down to cast Talrand. Caleb now goes to his turn, where he'll have to start off by casting Thrill of Possibility. He can't find a third land, so he'll just cast a Commander's Plate and then pass to me. With a big mana lead on my turn, I'll go ahead and cast Vorinclex, Monstrous Raider. I feel pretty comfortable being aggressive, so I'll swing both of my creatures out at Jelly. He declares no blockers, so he'll take 9 damage. On Derek's turn, he'll finally opt to use some mana. After playing a Swamp, he'll cast his commander, Toshiro Umezawa. At Derek's end step, Jelly uses his open mana to cast Peak, targeting me and looking at my hand. He'll get a Drake on the cast trigger, and then comment to the rest of the table about what's in my hand.
It is not a reveal. Sure. I can say what he's got in his hand. Oh, he's got some real nerd shit, I'll tell you that right now. Alright. Dan gonna try to blow us out.
Now on Jelly's turn, after seeing my hand, he'll play an Island and go to combat, swinging his Drake token at me. I can't block since it has flying, so I'll take the damage. Jelly's then going to hold up the rest of his mana and pass after that. Caleb still can't find a land on his turn, but he does find a Mind Stone to cast. Desperate for mana, he'll choose to cast a relatively low value Dockside Extortionist. He'll make 3 total treasures, but be done after that. Since Caleb's off to a slow start, I find myself in the rare position of being the biggest early game threat for once. I'll try to press my advantage by casting a Nature's Way, using Vorinclex to try to deal damage to Talrand. Jelly will respond by casting Reality Shift on Vorinclex, making a Drake, and exiling Vorinclex to allow me to manifest a card. I'll choose to back off after that and pass to Derek. Derek is still biding his sweet time, so he'll play a Biblioplex as land for turn and then pass. Jelly will play an island as his land for turn, then swing 2 Drakes over at me. I still don't have reach, so I'll take the damage. Back over to Caleb, who still can't find another land to save his life. He does have enough mana with the treasures to now cast Ilharg, so he'll sack 1 treasure and tap his mana to bring out his commander. This will give Sarulf a counter. Caleb will then use another treasure to cast Escape Velocity on Ilharg, giving Sarulf another counter from the treasure being sacrificed, and giving Ilharg haste. Caleb is now going to go ahead and move to combat. In response to the phase change, and not wanting a repeat of Game 4, Jelly will cast Rapid Hybridization on Ilharg to turn him into a Frog Lizard. The death will trigger Sarulf for a counter, and also Toshiro, so Derek will use the trigger to cast Dark Ritual, then use that mana to cast Succumb to Temptation to draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. He'll also get 2 cast triggers for the Sedgemoor Witch, making 2 pests. At Caleb's end step, Jelly will cast Mission Briefing, making a Drake. He'll leave the cards on top, then get back his Reality Shift, and go ahead and cast Reality Shift on Sarulf once it's back in his hand, and Sarulf goes back to the command zone. Jelly will get another Drake, but we make a mistake here as I forget to manifest another card for the Reality Shift. Back to me now on turn 6, where I'll play a Tyrite Sanctum as land for turn, and then recast Sarulf. I'll use some mana to activate Tyrite Sanctum, which puts a counter on Sarulf and makes him into a god. Derek has no actions to take on his turn, so he'll hold up his mana again and pass. Over to Jelly, who will play an island as land for turn, and then pay life to use a Gitaxian Probe on Derek. He'll make a Drake on the cast, and after looking at Derek's hand, he'll then cast Solve the Equation. This will let him tutor for diminishing returns to his hand. Jelly will then cast Diminishing Returns, which will cause all of us to draw new hands. Derek is going to respond with what he has in hand, casting an Infernal Grasp, losing 2 life to destroy Talrand. Sedgemoor Witch will trigger on cast, and Sarulf will trigger on death. Derek will then use his trigger from Toshiro to cast Infernal Grasp again, losing another 2 life to destroy my Dryad. He'll get to make another pest after that, although we make another mistake and Derek ends up with an extra pest. Diminishing Returns will now resolve, and we'll draw a fresh 7 after Jelly exiles the top 10 of his library. He'll go to combat, choosing now to swing 5 Drakes over at Derek, who can't block. After damage, Jelly passes. We'll now go to Caleb, who cast a Faithless Looting and still can't find another land even after all the cards he drew. Instead, he'll play out more ramp, casting a Thought Vessel, followed by a Fractured Power Stone. He'll then crack a treasure, triggering Sarulf, and then use that mana to cast a Scroll Rack. On Caleb's end step, I'll cast a Vampiric Tutor, losing 2 life and going to get a card to the top of my library. On my turn, I'll draw the card I tutored for, and see an opportunity to make a big play with both Derek and Jelly low on mana. I'll play a Swamp as my land for turn, and then cast Culling Ritual. No one has any responses, so all non-land permanents with 2 or less CMC will be destroyed, and I'll make green and black mana equal to the total amount. This will destroy 22 of my opponent's things and 2 of my things, netting me 22 counters on Sarulf and 24 mana total. Derek will gain 5 life from his pest dying. I awkwardly have to spend this mana during my pre-combat main phase, so I'll cast a Hunter's Insight on Sarulf, and then cast Phyrexian Scriptures. This gives Sarulf another counter and makes him into an artifact. Unfortunately, I ran out of cards to play, so I'll dump mana into sacrificing the Tyrite Sanctum to give Sarulf an indestructible counter. I'll then go to combat, and while I have a Brawn in my graveyard, I don't have any Forest, so I don't have Trample. Because of that, I'll choose to swing at Jelly since he doesn't have any blockers. No one has any responses to that, so Jelly will get punched for 29 and die. On damage, I'll draw 29 cards from the Hunter's Insight. I'll now have a full grip and then some, but unfortunately I don't have the mana from the Culling Ritual. Instead, I'll cast Explore, drawing a card and then dropping a Yavimaya as my extra land. I'll then cast Crop Rotation, sacking a land for an Urborg. Needing to get more cards out of my hand before discard, I'll cast a free Deadly Rollick on Toshiro to exile him, then cast 3 visits to go get a forest. I have nothing else to play after that, so I'll discard down and pass to Derek. In sharp contrast to my explosive turn, Derek's just going to be playing an Arcane Lighthouse as his land for turn and then passing. Caleb is officially on the struggle bus after getting his mana rocks blown up, so he'll cast the Flamekin Harbinger. It's going to allow him to tutor up a Generator Servant, but he has nothing else to play after that. At Caleb's end step, Derek's going to cast the Soul Shatter, forcing Caleb and I to sacrifice our only 2 creatures. This is going to trigger the Sedgemoor Witch as well, so Derek will get a pest. At Caleb's end step, I'm going to cast Entomb, using it to get a Daring Fiendbonder into my graveyard. Back to my turn, and the Phyrexian Scripture's second step will go off, destroying all non-artifact creatures. Derek will gain a life from the pest dying, and I'll go ahead and recast Sarulf after that, and exile a Daring Fiendbonder from my graveyard to give Sarulf indestructible again. I'll then use the rest of my mana to cast an Eternal Witness, getting back Garruk Wildspeaker from my graveyard to my hand. At my end step, Derek will activate the Biblioplex to look at the top of his library for an instant or sorcery. We'll go to Derek's turn, where he's more than content to do the classic of playing a swamp and passing. Caleb has the Generator Servant on top of his library, which means no land. He'll play the Generator Servant and then pass after that. On my turn now, the last part of Phyrexian Scriptures will go off, exiling Derek's graveyard. I'll then play a Field of the Dead as my land for turn, which will make a zombie on ETB. Derek will respond to the trigger by casting a Moonlight Bargain, choosing to keep all 5 cards and losing 10 life. Derek is then going to cast a Slaughter Pact on the Eternal Witness, and follow it up with a Sudden Edict to force me to sacrifice Sarulf. Unfortunately for Derek, those 2 removal spells may have backfired on him. I'll activate Cabal Coffers and use 2 green mana to cast Garruk Wildspeaker, then uptick Garruk to untap Golgari Rot Farm and Cabal Coffers. I'll tap both again, along with the rest of my lands, making a total of 17 mana. With that mana, I'll go ahead and cast Torment of Hailfire, having X equal to 15. Derek has 8 cards in his hand, and so he just barely won't have enough cards to discard or enough permanents to sacrifice to save himself, and so he'll die. Caleb is at enough life and cards to where he could survive with 6 life, but given that he's only on 2 lands still, he opts to go ahead and die too. This means that Sarulf will finally claim victory, and I'll take Game 5 of the Grand Tournament. After some pretty bad mana problems in the first couple of games, I was finally able to have a game of Sarulf where I hit my big threats at appropriate times and curved out well. The deck got to do a little bit of everything as intended, from a Voltron kill to doing some land shenanigans. Calling Ritual was the real MVP of this match, as it allowed me to clear the board, one-shot another player, and draw through nearly a third of my deck. It's a pretty insane card in Sarulf, and it likely should be played in other commander decks more often as well. It helped a lot that Caleb was almost a complete non-factor in this game. Although Ilharg did come out once, Caleb was uncharacteristically struggling with mana for the entire match and contributed very little. This isn't always going to be the case, but not having to worry about early aggression from Ilharg allowed the more value-based decks to thrive. There's not much else to say for Caleb since he missed so many land drops, but we'll see if he can bounce back from this game in the next episode. Jelly was able to get Talrand going a little bit better than the previous matches, but the problem he seems to keep running into is stalling out on cards towards the middle of the game. He had plenty of ways to make drakes, but unfortunately he didn't have enough removal, nor did he see enough counterspells to really establish control of the board. Had he hit any kind of counterspell or a card like Coastal Piracy, the game might have gone much differently. Finally, for Derek, he was able to showcase how well Toshiro can keep a board under control, despite having to deal with annoying keywords like indestructible. However, while Derek was keeping threats off the board effectively, he wasn't able to start advancing his own board state before I was able to cast Torment of Hailfire. Establishing a presence on the board is always a challenge for these decks that are so heavily reactive. This time, Toshiro wasn't able to overcome that challenge, but hopefully the pieces will come together soon for Derek. One of the key takeaways for this game would be to consider what alternate win conditions your decks may be able to support. While you don't want to pull your deck in too many different directions, it can be important to have an additional finisher or two, especially if they still synergize with the rest of your deck. This way, you'll still have outlets to win if your primary win condition gets shut down, or becomes too inefficient or risky to play. Let's go ahead and take a look at the scoreboard now. Caleb and I are both tied at 2 games apiece, with Jelly still at 1. Derek is still winless, but with the competition at the top still so tight, he has plenty of time to try to recover. Let us know who you think will take the next game in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe to get notified when the next episode's out. That's going to be it for this game, so as always, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.